Welcome to the February 19th bhyve production user call. We have Andrew, Ed, Jan, Roman, Alexei, Hans, and myself, Michael, so far. And while it's more a jail issue, Ivy pointed out that a VNet regression is still a problem that is linked in the doc. Hans is making progress with the ViRT.io SCSI, and the review is getting attention. Thank you to anyone who heard it here and jumped in. Thank you, Ed. And Roman, what news do you have on LibVirt?
Yeah, so I've been running my local CI with LibVirt integration test. They call it LibVirt CCK, and I was running it on AMD 64, and now I have finally extended to run on ARM 64 as well. There are a few tests still failing, but in general, things seem to be working more or less fine. So I would say this is probably the major news. And the minor news, I also added support for CPU pinning in the LibVirt bhyve domain configurations. And also, it actually uses the LibVirt syntax for pinning configuration that supports ranges, excluding some CPUs and so forth. And it actually do not depend on the recent patch to bhyve itself, which has ranges support for the -p argument. So that should be available in the next release, which should arrive in a week or so. So that's it.
You said TCK. What's the acronym of that CI thing? It was hard to hear.
Oh, that's a complex question. I need
Well,
to
what's
look.
what are the 3 letters or 4 letters for it?
I have no idea.
You said libvirt TCK or something on ARM64?
Yes, I do not remember what TCK actually means, but
Okay, no
that's
worries.
basically a set of integration tests and framework to run this integration test against the running libvirt instance to make sure it's working properly.
Got it. Thank you for that link. And from Joe, there we go. Thank you for looking that up, Jan. You're very good at that. That said, Hans, do you have a link to the CTL issue you saw? Which I'm guessing is ViRT.io SCSI related. Put a link in here. Boom. Multitask here. Technology compatibility kit. That's just about the most vague term yet. No problem.
If you look at the page, it explains what it does.
Perfect.
Or the first sentence.
Okay.
The framework for performing testing of the integration between different libvirt drivers, the underlying hypervisor technology, related operating system services, and system configuration. The idea and the name is motivated by the Java TCK.
Cool. Thank you, Jan. Oop, not too far. Cool. Not to lose it, I think Hansi mentioned a CTL issue. What is going on there? Complain about it not activating in 15 by default.
I didn't, but
Oh, that's
what
you.
I've noticed,
Oh, Jan to Hans. Yes.
but what I've noticed is that I can create a CTL conf to create LUNs.
Mm-hmm.
What I cannot do is create a port for the I/O control interface. Seems to be that's still something I have to do manually, or maybe the documentation is just not good enough so that I haven't found out.
You can have CTLd create one, but it requires running CTLd, which you don't need if you just want to use ViRT.io SCSI. You only need the CTLd daemon running if you wanted to respond to fiber channel or iSCSI connections. You can create the port and then set up a LUN map to allow which LUNs this port can see, and then add disks or files as LUNs or memory disks to CTL, all with CTL admin. But CTL admin is a very scripting unfriendly CLI tool because, for
Yeah,
example,
it's
when
also not
you
user
create
friendly.
one, it doesn't tell you which one it created and so on. So then you need to put some locking convention around that so that you and test it. I've scripted this, but so for bhyve that it does exactly what you would expect. So each virtual machine gets one VirtIO SCSI device, and then you can configure which ZFS volumes you want to expose over that virtual SCSI bus. Um, yeah,
Okay, so
it's
specific
a
to
lot more
the
painful to
regression.
script than it should, but I just wondered if you had read this bug report and if it is relevant to your work.
Thank you for finding that. I'll drop it in the doc, and it's been a while since I've tinkered with CTLd. After upgrading to 15, here we go. Okay. Okay.
So the target tells you the syntax here
Yeah.
to create the target, but yeah, now the port is down. Okay. If you enable the port with CTL up and port dish O on, yeah,
Okay, so
apparently this used to work. And Alan Summers reported that he's discussed it with Mav, and they have identified a commit hash they think introduced a regression.
perfect. Okay, so those tracking it, keep tracking. So let's over one tab. Come on, computer. Beach ball. bhyve iPXE crossed my desk, and there have been various ways to do this, be it like Marius's NFS handle script to work with bhyve load. Someone's really done their homework here. Take a look if that's something that interests you, but just want to get that out there. And we can either look at this now or in the future, but it was a very nice post about, hey, we moved to FreeBSD. It sounded very production usery and is getting some attention, and I've invited the author to join these calls. So it's on their radar. It was just motivating, if you will. So take a look at that. What's that? You're pretty muddled if that's to us, Andrew.
It is. Do we know what time zone it is to call practical student for them?
What time zone the person's in?
Yeah.
Don't know. Just that I said, hey, join the calls, and they said, oh, tell me more, and that's where we left off. So hopefully they show up. Maybe they're going to roll in. Who knows? Anyway, does anyone have topics before we dive into things like EDK2 and friends? Because there's a lot going on there, and we gave it quite a bit of some good attention last week, but it's a deep topic. All righty. Alexi, I'll let you kick this off because you've done some very good work here. You discovered that we probably need two different versions of EDK2 imports at least. So do tell us more.
The new version of EDK2, the latest one, they dropped 32-bit support.
Ah,
Yes.
such
First
that
legs are down.
a 32-bit VM is not
Yep.
supported, which
Emo-
bhyve will support, but now EDK2 won't.
QEMU, the QEMU 32-bit build is
Oh,
no
I
longer
see.
available.
Okay.
bhyve will support 32-bit OSs, don't worry.
Right, exactly. But does it need a separate payload for a 32-bit guest?
No.
Okay. Good to know. Other discoveries.
The Raspberry Pi 4 and Armada packages do not build anymore. Armada versions, because they're from the separate repos. Not from the mainline EDK2, they're from EDK2 platforms and EDK2 non-open source. And they're not very much maintained.
Okay. RPI4 sounds kind of important.
Yeah, they're not very much maintained. So yeah,
Okay.
what I propose is to have the latest EDK2 package just have bhyve and Kimu pretty much, just the x86 platforms, and have a separate legacy EDK2 package which has all of the tested ARM64, x86, 32-bit, all of the platforms that we need.
Would a meta package bring them both in, or you grab them individually? If there's like
You
bhyve
grab them
firmware.
individually, just like you do like
Okay.
EDK2 dash bhyve for
Mm-hmm.
each one of them. But we're gonna have bhyve dash firmware point to EDK2 dash legacy dash bhyve.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna name it like EDK2 dash legacy dash the platform.
Yeah. Given the size of the blobs compared to a single virtual machine, I wouldn't worry much about depending on all of them in the free bhyve firmware beta package.
Yeah, the bhyve firmware, yeah, just a meta package. Why the legacy one? Because all the tutorials that still have bhyve firmware as what you need to install, they usually they usually like do some old operating systems and use some like old stuff. So let's just keep old EDK2 for the legacy meta package.
I mean, I would think that the easier answer here would make the current package be a meta package that connects to both the new one and the legacy.
The meta package installs the stuff in like I mean, if we make the meta package install both old and legacy, then that's probably going to conflict in the bhyve dash firmware directory. But is it called UEFI? It's the UEFI dash firmware directory that the legacy stuff installs to. Oh, just gets symlinked to from the main firmware.
Hmm.
The other thing that's seen here is the idea of 164 being listed as kind of legacy, not being using the people and things like that.
We can
We're
barely
implying we're implying that eventually something maybe something that we're not interested in. My understanding is that very much not.
Andrew, I don't know if you're on speakerphone, but we sure can't hear you. Sorry to say.
I'm not. I'm on my
Wow.
headphones. It's the best I can do.
No, understood. Okay. So you mentioned ARM64 and EDK2. That raises a broader question. What are the odds of supporting bhyve ARM64 with EDK2 instead of U-boot?
It's going to be pretty much, I believe it's going to be similar to the Kimu package.
Mm-hmm.
Like the frame buffer is going to be interesting because it kind of depends on x86 assembly. There's just a blob of like x86 assembly for the raw frame buffer, the RFB thingy.
Good to know. And then that said, I think last week we very briefly touched on, but didn't dive into the CSM wrap. Could you explain what that does? Or doesn't do?
I don't have like a good idea, but it just runs the CSM firmware in a small environment to make it kind of work. It can boot simple console text-based BIOS applications, and it can load bootloaders like Grub, and maybe boot Windows. It can boot Windows, but only if how to explain this? It doesn't really provide good graphics.
Oh, so you mentioned a CBIOS as a module. Okay.
It is CBIOS. It is CBIOS just as a UEFI executable. For my tests, at least on bhyve, the graphics do not work. There's only text mode. So
Got
if
it.
you want to have it like a
Well,
graphical OS on this, it needs to support the GPU drivers of the virtual machine.
you
That
don't
doesn't
have
help.
any video BIOS support on CSM. You never had that on bhyve. And if you would add that, it may just work. But
Yeah,
it's really not surprising that this doesn't work because the bhyve lacks the support for that in CSM mode.
But that means if you use the legacy COM ports, you would get a usable serial console as system console.
Wait a second, I got distracted for a second.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll note Hans's comment.
Serial will probably work fine.
Because then you could boot FreeBSD with or in some other guest with a usable system console to debug stuff. You don't have to do things blind just because you don't have a video BIOS yet.
You could actually, I believe you can have some text using the legacy syscons console on FreeBSD.
Also, text mode works.
Yeah, text mode works, but there is no like
No VESA BIOS.
graphics. Yeah, no proper VBIOS graphics. Yep, Visa. That's
Yep.
I forgot the word. Yep, it was Visa.
Okay. Would that be complex to add or trivial to add?
I have no idea
No
because I have no
worries.
experience in
It's quite a bit of
vibes.
work.
Hans would know. Okay.
So there was someone writing a video BIOS which included a Visa BIOS ages ago. And in 2021, I picked that work up and made it work on bhyve plus some experimental changes from Corwin. And never was able to make it work again after the GPU pass-through finished because the stuff had changed so much in between. And the biggest problem why this wasn't integrated or even reviewed was that the video BIOS was written in assembly and nobody wanted to review that. Well, I'm into that shit, as they say. So I had a couple of ideas how to do it, and I would love to get this going again. The biggest problem is PCI option ROMs and making them work properly with our PCI emulation and with whatever the BIOS or UEFI firmware expects. There was stuff about around switching bars around and switching the op-ROM bar on and turning all others off. And I kind of got it working once and then never again. And in the end, it's just software, but it takes time to figure that stuff out. And then you need a video BIOS, which means you can either use the old assembly code that we have from back then, which pretty much worked except for a couple of bugs in the Visa support code. Yeah.
Boy. This is a multi-dimensional beast. Let's not lose track of all these things. And for what it's worth, the document is an attempt to do that.
I hope you didn't hear the beep. Oh.
What was that, Alex saying?
I hope you didn't hear the beep.
Oh, the beep. No, the noise cancellation is good when it's good. There's a beep.
Okay.
Okay, Roman, you kindly dropped in this link, and that's exactly what I was referring to. And I tried it last night. It very pleasantly blew my mind. However, I also tried building it last night. And one, it needs bash. Two, it choked on dependency resolution or something. It asked me to log into GitHub, which I did, and it tried to pull down stuff and failed. Roman, have you by any chance tried to build this? The Jared McNeil code?
No, not really. I just used the pre-built image.
So The pre-built image, again, works great. In theory, it might have an issue with the FreeBSD serial console, but I think it either wasn't enabled, so I didn't see it on the serial interface, but it worked. It just gave me a beautiful color countdown with the BIOS from the Quartz 64, and it was just an absolute normal user experience. I do not know what motivated this project, and I'm glad that it got a bunch of attention a year or two ago. They did some genuine coverage on other OSs like NetBSD and OpenBSD, and there's this entry for FreeBSD. And so I am motivated to seeing this succeed and continue, but as Alexei has confirmed, all things building EDK2 can be a challenge, to put it really politely. So if anyone wants to just sit down, check that out, and try to build it, I'd love that. I think I kept a log of my output during the process. And I'm no GitHub whiz, so there's that. Maybe it's a user error. Okay, so I might be able to bring that up without much trouble. But yes, for those with that board or related boards, it's a thing. Also to that point, Alexei, this may interest you. I have a script to rip apart the ARM64 VM image plus the Rock Pro image using the build artifacts and assemble essentially a root on ZFS image for the Quartz 64 that happened to work on, yes, the Quartz 64. I'm talking to Colin about how perhaps the make image command could support the free type of partition to leave some space for the U-boot payload and landing zone. And I woke up this morning thinking, well, wait a minute. I wonder if one can simply have a package for all the DTBs, because I learned how to build them last night a la carte rather than in the whole release. And let me do a package search here on ARM64 DTB. But FreeBSD DTB, there is a package. Fantastic. Okay, well, I will report back on what I find there. But Roman, if you want root on ZFS images for that board, let me know. I've got an unholy script to assemble it and prototype it. And it worked, first try. So there's that. Virtual show of hands, who cares about ARM64? I care about the bhyve aspect, but there's a whole lot of plumbing to get the thing booted on any given platform. So maybe this is not the time and place to explore that, but
I've never really
don't be
worked with
shy.
ARM64 because I don't have any hardware except for a phone that can
Okay.
run UEFI on.
You did show some pretty cool stuff. You
Yeah.
had a hypervisor on your phone. Thank you very much. Did you not?
Yeah, but that was just more or less generic stuff on a Google Pixel phone. I was just testing
Okay.
out Kimo there.
Cool.
I just installed the custom distribution of Android, got the root account there, and run Kimo. It kind of worked,
Cool.
but because there is like some CPU cores have virtualization, some CPU cores don't have virtualization, it kept scheduling Kimo on CPU cores that don't have virtualization and
Oh, no
crashing.
kidding. Great. Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Crashing is it
that's
scheduled
funny.
it on the course without virtualization because there's like two different types of CPUs.
that's
in the
so
phone.
fucking stupid to have different instruction sets between cores, because then it's no longer SMP, because then it's a heterogeneous system, and it's a really massive problem. Reminds me of one mobile ARM chip where the manufacturer really fucked up by having different cache line sizes between the big and little cores.
Goodness.
So yeah, if you wanted to invalidate something by cache line correctly, according to ARM documentation, you're supposed to query the cache line size and then do it once per cache line. But if your code started on the big cores, it would get I think 64-byte cache line size, would do it every 64. But if then your code got rescheduled onto a little core, suddenly it would only invalidate every other cache line.
Alrighty.
of course, the consequences of that are sporadic mystery memory corruptions.
Yuck.
Yuck. Okay, so Alexei, do you desire ARM64 hardware?
Yeah, I wanted to buy a Raspberry Pi 02 recently.
Okay.
I don't think those are bhyve capable.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. So, Roman, you have hardware. I think I have matching hardware. Alexei has hardware. Virtual show of hands. Is anyone else poking at ARM64 here and now? So I don't want to drown out
Yes.
those who couldn't care less. What boards do you have, if I may? And I don't mean to make
I
a router.
have FreeBSD on ARM64 running as a virtual machine on a Mac.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
have a few Raspberry Pis flying around.
How
Um,
recent?
Free B plus, so
Okay.
they can run 64-bit FreeBSD. Um, at least they used to. I haven't tested in a while.
You said
I
B3
mostly care
plus?
about, yeah,
Okay.
free B plus.
3B. Thank you.
Um, yeah, I would use it. It will work better, but I don't have easy access to a interesting home server class system. So something like in the low-end desktop range.
Like a Minis Forum MSR1?
Yeah, something like that, maybe
Cool.
with less broken stuff. But yes,
Yeah.
if you would materialize one of those at my doorstep, I wouldn't leave it outside. But other than that,
No, okay.
um, yeah,
Roman.
right? DGX, whatever.
Yes. So, and the B, I see a comment about the Court 64 from Roman. I picked up the same one he has. I need to give bhyve a go. The B model, I believe, has M.2, which could be interesting. So one has PCI, one has M.2, and to their credit, they use the same layout of the classic Rock Pro 64, such that 3D printed cases and all should drop in. It uses an oddball power supply, unfortunately not USB-C. Slightly, maybe you could adapt it, but Roman, you and I, let's kind of focus on keeping that as a well-supported platform, even if it's just documenting those 3 pins. I think it was like 6, 8, and 10 to get the serial console working, which is a super high-speed serial console, blah, blah, blah. So now is probably not the time and place for that, but let's work that. From the, I wouldn't say bong rip department as a joke among some IT people, but gee, there is a NetBSD userland for Linux, and I had this terrible thought, and it's more of a jail question, but could that be used to provide a Linux compatible NetBSD userland in a jail, in a Linux compatibility jail in FreeBSD? I cannot say what the use case would be, but there it is. For those who want to go down that road, yeah. Who mentioned, okay, the 5 plus on boards. One, I have one on my desk. Two, my colleague has the 6, and we've been exploring the CIX chip issues on bhyve. So, Roman, let's have that conversation, be it in chat or otherwise. But officially, ARM64 is a first-class platform in FreeBSD 15. Let's live up to that. And it's a challenge that, gee, not every developer has every popular board out there, and that's totally understandable.
That's understandable. I just want some documentation on which boards work to which degree.
Amen. Okay, well, I will start with the ones within reach. Everyone else, please do the same. Uh, Linux Musel, not supported. Funny that. NetBSD should work. Okay, here we go. Ha. GNU Herd. There's a name you don't hear every day. Okay, so I just want to put this out there. It's in the doc. Maybe we'll touch on it in the jails call, but oop, no, didn't get the GitHub link. There it is. If you can think of a use case, I'm all ears. Anyway, that worked. Okay. Uh, Other topics, questions, ideas, concerns? I would love to see this Quart 64 code build, which raises the question, should it eventually become a port within FreeBSD such that people with those can just, well, package, install, and grab that firmware, or what is the correct distribution model? Don't know. And yes, Jan, the wiki needs some love regarding from 64. 27s. Okay.
Oh, yes, I did check the wiki, and I know there are partial documentation for certain old Allwinner boards and so on. But oftentimes it's not really the stuff a user would care about. I just want to know which peripherals are supported, which ones aren't. Is there any non-obvious peripheral you need, like for example, a PLL clock driver, so that you can actually run the CPU at the right frequency and stuff like that?
Right. Daniel,
Because for a lot
welcome.
of
Go ahead, Jan.
FreeBSD users, it's probably fine if the board has a serial console and working Ethernet and storage. GPU is just nice to have for a lot of embedded systems.
Daniel, we've covered some EDK2, we've covered some adventures, some things like NetBSD userlands ported elsewhere. Birthday cake in your mouth. I hope it's, well, is it your birthday? Happy birthday. Happy birthday, someone. Alexei, at this very moment, do you have time to poke at things relating to EDK2?
Sure, I can boot up my
Okay.
FreeBSD VM and poke at
Cool.
things.
Well, I don't mean literally right now, but just broadly this coming few weeks,
Oh.
etc. So
Okay.
let's make a kind of a tangible list of goals because it's such a multi-dimensional beast. I'll say that again.
The first goal is submit the package, of course.
Okay.
Actually fix the build for many people and
Did
make
you
a
have
legacy one.
Did you have a chance to revisit that Intel GPU index bug that it correctly chooses the right card with a newer model?
I decided the best way would be just to have an option in bhyve to disable GVTT for any GPU.
Okay,
Like for
please
any
run that
GPU.
by Hans, perhaps, who's here, because Corvin's been pretty quiet lately. But yeah, let's find out what the proper way to handle that is. So let's not lose it here.
Is Jan a contributor?
Jan, no, Hans, yes. Well,
Okay.
Jan contributes in countless ways. Flag to disable G, which one is it? TV, V. There's a zillion of them. Which is the Intel one to consider disabling, Alexei?
GVTD.
GVT-D.
GVT-D. Thank you. And Hans, does that align with your findings? We so need a bhyve hackathon.
We
Thank you
just
very
have
much.
Sorry, what? What
So-
aligns with what?
Were you on the call when Alexei banged out some code to either, I guess it was choose the correct Intel handling for a new Intel ARC, and it was not clear if it should automatically sort of detect that or if there should just be a flag to say, hey, no, we do not want GVTD.
a
I don't
flag would be
remember,
useful
actually.
too, because even the Intel GPUs that require GVTD can still be passed through without it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
It
but
works
then
kind
you
of differently.
One at a time.
It works kind of differently when you pass them through without GVTD, but it works.
Well, I never got it to work, so maybe you can tell
Okay.
me what I did wrong.
It's painful. I can only get it working actually with a Linux guest,
Okay.
and by giving it a VBIOS.
One retrieved from the card or one in the.
Retrieve from the card.
Okay. Whew. Okay.
I believe there should be a repo of vBIOSes by Intel. Oh wait, no, that's AMD. That's AMD. They have a repository with vBIOSes.
They do. Okay.
Yeah, Intel has a repository with just firmware support packages and
Okay.
platform support packages.
Hmm.
AMD
Oh.
tends to be a little more open with things than a lot of the other people in the x86 space.
Andrew, which of the two is more open?
AMD
Yeah,
tends to be.
AMD. Got it.
One could argue that older Intel chips are more open because there's so little to hide about them,
Hmm.
given the feature set.
Well, that's just a function of them having been around longer. That's not
Like, you're talking about 808 or what?
friendly.
What chip are you talking about? 808?
How far back? Uh, while we work that out, Daniel, you are unmuted. Happy birthday, someone, perhaps you.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, no kidding. Awesome. Um, are you doing anything with ARM64 beyond like talking on a phone from a subway and joining the call?
Well, I use ARM64 for all of my cloud VMs just because they're a little bit cheaper. So when somebody says, "Oh, you have to have this, that regulation," and I'm not allowed to run it on my own, I run FreeBSD ARM64. But besides like Mac OS experiments and stuff like that, mostly is VMs, but I try to boot it now and then. That's all so far. But I don't know. You said you could boot on, boot a recent Mac box, right?
Uh, in what regard?
Boot FreeBSD, I mean, on native
Oh,
on Mac hardware.
no, OpenBSD, yes. The
Ah,
second to last release, they used the Asahi sort of framework and installer, etc., which was very pleasant to use. I was very pleasantly surprised. Um, I don't know, gee, if a working OpenBSD system across the desk would be useful for, say, FreeBSD development.
mhm.
And Jan, I know you've had some concerns that it'll never fully be supported and it could be a lot of pain and suffering and never having GPU and never having that. But the single thread performance is amazingly quick and it's a rather available platform for what it's worth. So tragically, one of the people leading that development passed away at BSDCan. And I don't know if anyone in FreeBSD land is working on, say, Apple Silicon supported FreeBSD Edmast. If you know anything, let me know. But hey, I've only got the tea leaves I've got.
What
I'm not
would
aware
it
of
be?
anyone specifically. I know there's a few people with interest and have been prodding things along, but I don't know of anyone with a concerted effort on it.
No worries. Kyle Evans was definitely interested. And let's briefly, realistically, and Jan, bring in your full cynicism. Is that a platform to target, or it will always be incomplete, like every other ARM board out there, short of maybe Ampere? What expectations should we set?
I
Welcome,
think we
Hazen.
should set the expectation that FreeBSD will run really well as a guest on MacBooks.
And it does.
Nah, I mean, what would be nice if, I don't know, we have a proper documentation, maybe how to use Xquads or stuff like that, so that you get a X11 rootless environment, so that you can have
Good
just
point.
Windows floating around on your Mac
Oh, I see. Integrated
with
like that.
video acceleration and so on running remotely with
Fancy.
indirect OpenGL or something like that. I know that's dated technology, but it used to work with indirect rendering. If we could, basically, here you can have some kind of rootless FreeBSD system so that you can have graphical windows. We have a native Apple provided, barely maintained X server.
Right. Okay.
maybe that is useful to people. Or if we don't want it to or demand it to be rootless, we could just make sure we have proper driver support on ARM for VirtIO GPU stuff, so that you can get at least your favorite desktop environment with drop shadows or whatever,
Hmm.
and aren't restricted to SSHing locally. Maybe also document UTM or another hypervisor, how to make it painless. I know that there was a FreeBSD Foundation sponsored video on how to quickly set it up with QEMU on the command line. But where it becomes annoying is when you have to deal with the network integration into macOS. Because for some things you want it to be bridged, but bridge doesn't really work with Wi-Fi. So then you have to do something knotted, but that
Okay,
doesn't
okay.
out of the box work easily with IPv6. So then you end up with some host-only networking, maybe, so that you have a stable IP address.
Hmm.
And all of that works, but it even performs reasonably well. But the problem is you now expect the user to be an experienced network administrator,
Right.
which most Mac users aren't, because I don't think the trend of FreeBSD developers having a MacBook as a daily driver is going to end with ARM necessarily. So we should keep their productivity up.
Amen. Hazem, did you catch any of our discussion of ARM64? I think in passing you've mentioned you do use some boards. I think we have consensus to at least keep the wiki up to date on what boards are supported, what individual components are not supported. And I'd love your input because I think you've used a
Yeah,
few.
I primarily work with like rock chip boards. So the model number was I think 3588. I work with that a lot these days, and I also work with BPI boards, BPI R3, R4, a lot on in Linux space
You
for
said
some of our
BPI
products.
or RPI?
Yeah, Banana Pie. Yeah,
Oh, Banana Pi, yes.
yeah, yeah.
Any with FreeBSD?
I tested FreeBSD on R64, but it was not a fun experience.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
what can you name some specific rock chip boards you have?
Yeah, the RK3588. That is one SoC that a lot of boards have.
Yeah. What
They're
about the
mostly
board
found in like
itself, like
NAS boards.
Rock Pro or Quartz or
Uh,
anything?
I think Rock 5B by Radza.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put you on that list of sort of kind of interest here. So, because it's there's a small aspect of bhyve, but then there's a whole lot of lift to get it going, and that's been adventuresome. And then, of course, the whole role of EDK2, which, yeah, that I did look at the Tionic Core Foundation. They just call themselves a group of people supporting it, so I don't know what that means in practice, if there is anything formal or if it's just, hey, a wiki and a repo. I don't know, but if you know, great. Okay, we've covered some good ground. I got off my chest some of these things. Any other topics, ideas, questions, concerned? Hazem, thank you for shipping that link over. Copy link.
Well, I don't know if this is early in the conversation, but is there sort of a, kind of recommended by everybody here, if I wanted to practice bhyve on ARM, like what's a relatively inexpensive server I could get? Like, is there anything for under 500, under 1,000? It makes sense because last I checked, it was $10 billion to get one of those monster amperes, but
Nah, it's 2 or 3 thousand if to get a useful configuration,
yeah, right.
But that's still
which
a big
is
ask.
Yeah, exactly. It's in the that's painful for hobbyist test
Yeah.
deployment. It's easily doable for business, of course. You will have to wait a few days longer than buying a Raspberry Pi off Amazon, but if they're on stock.
Uh, Daniel,
It's
it's one of my
it's
first quarter
certainly
goals to answer that. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah.
it's certainly in the realm of a little eye watering if it's just for a personal toy.
Right. I mean, even for business experimentation, it's a big question. What is this going to do for us again? Is
Exactly.
this gonna is this gonna help us with the I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that the economy of it is pretty interesting, not just for power, but well, we all know why ARM is cool.
Uh, and I will say the Ampere is wickedly quick. Like build world, I think it was 18 minutes, kernel like 2 minutes. And yeah, I've got those numbers squirreled away. Well, oh gosh, I'll keep sharing what I've been doing. And Daniel, I don't know if you caught it. I ripped apart the existing published images and made a Rudon ZFS image for the Quartz 64, and it worked. So there's that.
Yeah,
So,
nice.
yeah, the big problem for ARM64 operating system development is the gap between a Raspberry Pi class single board computer and a rack mounted server.
Correct.
You don't have the thing someone puts on a corner of the desk. The closest I know is this mini is from MSR1. It's fairly new, and it's a bit weird. It's cobbled together Chinese chip with fairly modern ARM cores in it.
Yeah, it supports UEFI, and that was my first purchase of the year to get this really going. But I'm having bhyve freak out. And
Yeah,
so it's kind of been the chicken and egg of just how do I quickly traverse 15 stable, 16 current, and release and determine exactly where things are so I don't get barked at on my bug reports by BZ. So watch this space. I'm guessing all of the calls have an ARM64 aspect, and we like shouldn't say, "Hey, it's ARM64 day," but wow, some form of hackathon would sure be nice because there's a lot of stuff to explore. So how about step one was the general consensus to work on the wiki and just document. The other is who among us want to just chat informally about what we've learned and hey, can you try this? Okay, fine. Uh, a request from yesterday's OpenZFS call. Rob Norris has some was it SHA 512
um,
support for the absolute latest and greatest Intel CPUs. If you have one, he'd love to spend a minute with it validating his pull request before committing it. Lunar Lake or Silly Lake, new
There were
name.
two of them.
Yeah.
um,
Anyhow, just want to get that out there.
It's in the other document which ones they were. I don't remember the name.
No, very true. And it was like Alma Lake or something. Let me grab that from Fediverse. Do, 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 do,
should be on
do.
the Jails call minutes.
OpenZFS, but yes, it's there. Let me
Yeah, CFS, sorry.
here it goes.
Um,
Arrow
uh,
Lake, not the U laptop model, and apparently one of these still hasn't shipped yet. So between
Oh,
Arrow Lake,
Aerolake is very fun. I really like Aerolake. One of my friends
you
has
have one?
Aerolake. One of my
Did-
friends has Aerolake.
yes,
He has shown me some of the funny stuff with the CPU. I really like how fast it is for some mathematical stuff.
that's kind of what he's trying. So is this a friend who might be
Yeah.
running, say, Linux and could try
Yeah.
some OpenZFS code?
Maybe.
Uh,
He's
let's
running like
chat.
Z. He's running ZFS actually already.
Then you would just found the perfect contact. Let's talk outside of this.
Okay.
If anyone,
maybe a bit off topic, but PXE related. I
yes,
looked into the FreeBSD PXE boot code, and it, just as the cliche says, was written in the mid to late 90s and not really touched since in some places. So the issue is that it has this cursed function called send receive, which sends a single frame or packet and then expect the exact response to that packet. And if it receives anything else on the wire, it will discard that and try again, eventually with an exponential back off in multiple of whole seconds. So the end result is if you just have a once per second ping running, you will hang the boot until ping stops. You can hang it, the
Yes.
boot process for 30 minutes with that easily, and it doesn't really make progress. You can not even load the loader configuration files via NFS v2. And it looks like the problem could be made worse by more modern chips having some kind of queue in there, where every packet is then queued so that you would receive multiple wrong packets instead of just discarding stuff on the wire in favor of the latest packet. Because some systems on a perfect idle network have more or less reasonable boot times and others don't. So it depends on what your network card ships as a PXE ROM.
Yep.
Possible workaround is to do some kind of chain booting through iPXE so that you would net boot into iPXE. That helped with some, but the other thing I tested is to use TFTP instead of NFS to load the kernel,
That's a
which
booted
booted a
right?
lot. What?
That's a
Yeah,
classic
that's a classic way to
structure,
do
right?
it.
Yeah, the default way to do it is to use NFS,
Oh, okay.
NFS version 2 over UDP, instead of TFTP in the. But if you do that, then your kernel will come up without a mounted root file system. And even if it knows which file system to mount, it will fail to mount the NFS root file system in that case. So it will just hang forever, waiting for the root file system to be mounted. It tries something, it logs mounting so and so, but it doesn't succeed unless it was loaded over NFS. I commented out the two lines which did the real exponential back off by just commenting out the delay loop, which reduced the boot time of just the bootloader from roughly 5 minutes to get to the loader menu, where even the entries in the loader menu took time to load.
Yep.
To just booting in a few seconds to that point and then taking a minute or so to load the kernel and kernel modules, which I consider not great but usable. But of course, if you're speaking UDP, those exponential backoffs are there for a reason. Just ripping them out potentially makes it very fragile in other ways, because then you set yourself up for a congestion collapse. Let's say
Okay.
you have a 100 server
Yep.
cluster. So yeah, the whole PXE booting of FreeBSD, it exists, but it doesn't look like it's well tested.
Do you have a PR or anything we can track relating to that?
There have been multiple PRs about people complaining that PXE boot doesn't work, hangs, whatever, over the
Yeah,
decades.
but they might not know the cause.
But none of them, none of the ones I've seen are a good starting point for actually fixing this. The annoying part is that it's mainboard and network card specific.
Ah. Hmm. But
At
you
least
did
with
make a
this,
comment about, say, ancient NetBSD PXE code being brought in and never quite adapted for modern network
yeah, that is part of the problem, but
queuing or
it's
something.
also, it has to be so tiny that we can't just pull in the whole FreeBSD network stack into the bootloaders, because there's not enough space and the support ecosystem for a full network stack isn't there.
Hmm.
So it has to be something hacky like that. it could probably be tuned a little better and having one buffer for unexpected packets and one for the expected ones, so that you can at least drain the receive queue until you receive a certain number of unexpected packets, so that you can deal with a certain ratio of unexpected to expected packets.
Well,
So, and then you would basically, I don't know, process up to 20 unexpected packets per expected packet. Or if the buffer runs idle, you block. So just having two buffers instead of one receive buffer could possibly make it a lot more resilient in the face of something like multicast traffic or broadcast traffic. And it was made worse by PIX to process packets other than the expected ones, so that, for example, updating the app cache works. Yeah,
yeah, those
there have been
tickets seem
multiple
pretty
reports.
vague.
Some of them have been, yeah, because it's hard to debug and to describe for
Yeah.
most users.
Gee,
It's
might
also hard to debug for a developer because you don't have a kernel, so you kind of have to debug it in a virtual machine so that you can attach GDB,
I was
or
about
you
to
need
say, might a
some debug
hypervisor help?
cable,
Yeah.
or maybe you need, yeah, I don't think you have a stub. So unless you don't have a GDB stub in the boot ROM, so you can't even easily attach. So yeah, you basically have to single step with a hypervisor, and good luck combining that with network card. So now you have to pass through a network card and then try to use that. It's not really the same environment. In theory, there are these USB-C debug cables for certain systems and so on.
Okay.
But I think they also require a stub. It's not full JTAG access. Yeah, it's messy to debug, which is
Well,
probably why nobody wanted to improve the code.
keep us posted. Think about how to reproduce what you're seeing, and I sure hope it's not
And
absolutely platform dependent and there are a million different possibilities.
and to make it
I know.
even more funny,
Yes.
it's kind of going away with UEFI only systems because PXE is a bias boot mechanism. Instead, there are different net boot mechanisms in UEFI via HTTP.
Back to EDK2. Great. Yes, Andrew.
I know as far as Pixie booting goes, all of the Pixie booting setups I've seen, I mean, none of them are FreeBSD, but all the ones I've seen use TFTP for loading the kernel. And none of them use NFS.
Your punchline cut out. So all the ones you've seen of what?
Use TFTP for
Yep.
loading the kernel. None of them use NFS. I've never seen anybody do that.
It's the default with the FreeBSD PXE loader.
Interesting.
Load,
Okay.
it has a minimal NFS version 2 client implementation.
I've seen the implementation in Pixie systems, but I've never seen the kernel loaded that way. I've always seen it done TFTP.
Yeah, I've tried TFTP. That on the problematic system that was a lot faster, but the system didn't boot to multi-user successfully. Instead, it hang trying to mount the NFS root. It knew the correct mount information because it said trying to mount so and so, and then some further device enumeration happened concurrently. So there were a few lines beyond that, but the system would never successfully mount a root file system and start in it. When I tried the TFTP way.
Well,
yeah.
If you know of any potential sponsors for hackathons, like I could organize an in-person one next week if needed with all the things. Let's do it. But anyway.
One possible workaround around this problem is to build a kernel with a small in-memory file system built into the kernel image to do the next step, and then, for example, establish an iSCSI connection or whatever, and reroute into the now available block device. But that's a bespoke kernel you have to build for your needs.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to keep the MFS file system small because it has to be downloaded over TFTP and stays resident over the whole system runtime.
I recall that size being what, 70 megabytes or something, and then eventually increased. It's been a while.
I think it's no longer that critical on
Okay.
modern systems. Technically, you can probably have a far larger kernel. On a really big server, that wouldn't matter because if you have a terabyte of RAM, what's half a gigabyte of file system, and it
Mm-hmm.
would be a very fast file system because it's a memory file system.
Exactly.
So it could be tempting for big servers to use giant MFS root devices built into the kernel
Mm-hmm.
as a kind of atomic update for an immutable system. But it's also wasteful, especially if your main memory is small.
You would think that, except if you have a giant server, you're probably segmenting that off to use a bunch of different basically VMs. So the question then becomes, okay, now we multiply this extra overhead by 10, 20.
You
We're
wouldn't
suddenly
have to,
quickly talking about real numbers.
but you wouldn't have to do it that way. For example, you could use VidIO SCSI to have the host with bhyve and FreeBSD at least, establish an iSCSI connection to the whatever kind of fiber channel, whatever storage you have. In future, maybe NVMe over Fabrics connection, and pass through the device over VidIO SCSI into the guest, and then the guest sees a VidIO SCSI device which EDK2 can boot from. And it looks like to the guest a normal virtual VidIO SCSI disk, which, yeah, UEFI boot support for that exists in bhyve firmware, and the guest wouldn't know about that. And if you use jails, it's a non-issue because you don't have to boot a jail.
There you go. Keep us posted. Anything else at this time, or should we quit while we're ahead? Well, going down the long list of unmuted people, Jan, you can have the honors, and I can stick around a few minutes afterwards.
Like and subscribe, everyone crazy enough to still listen to us jabbering.
Dankeschön.